My sister beat me up the night before prom, and I walked into that gym covered in bruises, while she stood there like nothing happened. I had kept my hands to myself my entire life. Every time she went off, every time she grabbed me or swung at me or left marks I had to explain to people, I never hit back. Not once. Not in 18 years. And then one night, years later, everything I had swallowed for so long finally came back out. In about half a second, and I have never once apologized for it since. My name is Caleb. I'm 26 now, and I grew up in a mid-sized town in Ohio with my parents and my older sister, Renee. Renee is 3 years older than me. From the outside, she looked like a lot of things. Sharp, funny, the kind of person who dominated a room just by walking into it. People liked her. Teachers liked her. My parents adored her. She was confident and charismatic and, if I'm being honest, genuinely smart. Inside our house, she was a completely different person. I want to be honest about something from the very beginning. I'm not telling this story to make Renee into a monster. She had real anger problems, the kind that probably had roots in things neither of us fully understood at the time. I don't know what was going on inside her. What I know is what she did, and what it cost me, and what eventually happened when the math finally came due. Renee had a temper that operated on a hair trigger. It didn't take much. A wrong look, a sound she didn't like, a door closed too loud. Any of it could set her off. And when she went off, she didn't argue. She didn't yell and storm out of the room. She went physical. Immediately. Hands and elbows and whatever else was nearby. I was her primary target. I should tell you what kind of kid I was, because it matters for understanding the whole picture. I was sensitive, genuinely almost embarrassingly sensitive. I cried easily. I felt things deeply. I was the kid who apologized in the middle of a fight because he didn't like the feeling of conflict hanging in the air. I was not built for what I was living with. And here's the thing. Every time Renee hit me, every time I ended up on the floor or nursing something that hurt, my response was always the same. I went to my mom and I cried and I said some version of, I love her. I don't want to hurt her. I just want her to stop. My mom would nod and stroke my hair and talk to Renee, and Renee would be calm for a while, and then the cycle would start again. My dad knew it was happening. Neither of them called it what it was. I think they didn't have the vocabulary for it. The idea that a younger brother could be the victim of a sister's physical abuse. It didn't fit the picture of our family that they wanted to hold, so I held the weight of it myself. People always ask me, or they would if they knew the full story, why I never fought back. And I've thought about that question a lot over the years, because it's not as simple as fear. Part of it was fear, honestly, not of Renee exactly, but of what happened inside me when things got violent. My whole body responded to conflict like a system shutting down, heart racing, throat closing, that specific sting behind the eyes that meant tears were coming whether I wanted them or not. I hated that response. I hated that I had it, but I couldn't override it. Part of it was love. That sounds absurd, I know. She was hurting me and I loved her. But she was my sister, and the version of her that hurt me wasn't the only version. There was a Renee who stayed up late watching movies with me and laughed at things no one else found funny. There was a Renee who showed up for me in specific quiet ways that didn't make the highlight reel. I held on to that version. I used it to explain away the other one. And part of it, and this is the part I've had to be most honest with myself about, was that I had been told, in 100 small ways, that keeping the peace was my job. Not explicitly, but the message was there. Don't escalate, don't make it worse. Be the calm one. So I was. For years, I was a good student. I had a close group of friends, 4 guys I'd known since middle school, the kind of friendships where you don't have to explain yourself. I played bass guitar badly and loved it. I had a girlfriend junior year who I was crazy about. I had a life that was genuinely good in most of the ways that counted. I just also had Renee. And I had learned, over years of careful management, how to keep those two things from touching each other too often. My friends didn't really know the extent of it. My girlfriend knew something was off at home, but not the details. I kept the compartments clean. The prom incident blew the compartments open. It was a Friday night in May, the night before prom, I was a junior. My girlfriend at the time, a girl named Amber, and I had spent weeks planning the night. Suit, corsage, dinner reservation at an actual restaurant with cloth napkins, the whole thing. I was 17 and genuinely excited in that uncomplicated way you can only be at 17. Renee had been in a mood all week. I don't remember what specifically had set her off. It rarely mattered. Something at her job, something with a friend, something that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with what happened next. I walked into the hallway of our house around 9 p.m. and turned the light on. She was lying on the couch in the living room adjacent, trying to sleep. That was it. That was the whole reason. She came off that couch fast, faster than I expected, the way she always moved when she was genuinely enraged, like the anger had its own momentum. I remember thinking I should run. I remember not running. I don't know why. What followed was not a quick shove. She hit me, multiple times. I ended up on the floor. I remember the specific texture of the hallway carpet against my cheek. I remember hearing my own breathing, trying to keep it steady, trying not to cry and failing. When it was over, she went back to the couch, like she'd swatted a fly. I went to my room and sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. Then I went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. My cheekbone had a bruise forming. My left forearm had a mark where she'd grabbed and twisted. My lower lip was split slightly at the corner. Nothing that needed a hospital. Everything that needed to not be visible the next evening. I didn't sleep much that night. The next day, I put on the suit. I picked up the corsage. I drove to Amber's house and stood on her porch while her mom took photographs. Amber looked beautiful. I looked like someone who had been in a fight and tried to cover it with concealer that didn't quite match. Amber's mom asked, very quietly, while Amber was inside getting her bag, if I was okay. I said I was fine. I smiled. We went to prom. Inside that gym, under the lights, I danced with my girlfriend and laughed with my friends and did everything a junior at prom is supposed to do. And underneath all of it, I was aware, the entire night, of the specific tenderness on my cheekbone every time the light caught it at an angle, of the way certain songs made the split in my lip sting when I smiled too wide. Several people noticed. No one said anything directly. I could feel them not saying anything, which in some ways was worse. Renee was not at prom. She was 3 years older. But she was there anyway. In every careful angle I held my face, in every explanation I rehearsed and didn't have to give. She was completely present in her absence. And that's when something changed in me. Slowly, quietly, in a way I didn't have a name for yet. Not rage, not a plan, just a tightening, like a door that had been drifting open for years finally found its frame. After prom, after graduation, things shifted between Renee and me, not dramatically, but noticeably. I had moved out at 18 the week after I graduated. Not dramatically. No big scene, no confrontation. I just started spending more time at my friend Derek's place. And then one day I had a box of my things in his spare room, and then I had a part-time job and a mattress on the floor, and a key that was mine. The distance helped. Renee, without me as a daily target, seemed to regulate better. She got a job she liked. She started therapy, I think, though she never talked about it directly. We reached something like a functioning relationship. Cautious, friendly on the surface. I came to family dinners. I made her laugh sometimes. I was careful not to trust her completely. The way you're careful around an animal that has bitten you and then been calm for a long time. The calm is real. But so is the memory. I kept coming back to the prom night every time I caught myself relaxing too much around her. Not obsessively, just as a calibration. A reminder of what she was capable of when the pressure inside her exceeded whatever was containing it. You have to understand. I didn't walk around angry all the time. I had processed most of it, or at least I thought I had. I had built a life outside of her reach. I had friends, a job I was decent at, a social life that had nothing to do with our family dynamic. I was okay, but I had never said the thing I needed to say. Not to her, not to my parents, not out loud in any form. I had never named what she had done as what it was. I had never stood in front of her and said, "What you did was abuse, and I did not deserve it. And it is not something I'm going to carry for you. That omission lived in me like a splinter that had gone too deep to find easily. About a year after I graduated, I tried once. We were at my parents' house for Thanksgiving, and the two of us ended up in the kitchen alone for a few minutes while everyone else was in the living room, and I said, carefully, quietly, I want to talk sometime about when we were kids, about some of the stuff that happened. Renee looked at me for a moment. Then she said, that was forever ago. Let it go. She picked up a dish and walked out of the kitchen. I stood there for a moment. Then I picked up a different dish and walked out after her, and we both sat at the Thanksgiving table and passed the mashed potatoes and nobody said anything. I want to be honest about something. I let that moment pass. I could have pushed. I chose not to, because the holiday was happening around us, and because I still, even then, defaulted to keeping the peace. Old habits. Old training. What I didn't fully account for was that the door I thought I had closed was still open. Just waiting. The night everything actually ended started like 100 ordinary. Saturday nights, a friend of mine, a guy named Marcus, who I'd known since high school, had a small get-together at his place. Maybe 12 people, music, some drinks. The relaxed, specific comfort of being around people you've known long enough that you don't have to perform anything. I had maybe 2.5 drinks over a few hours. I'm a light drinker by habit. I knew my baseline, and I was well inside it. Renee was there. She knew Marcus, too. Had known him longer than I had, actually. For most of the night, things were fine. She was in good form, laughing, sociable, the version of herself that other people got to see. I gave her space, she gave me space, and it worked. Then, around midnight, people started leaving. Renee and I lived in the same direction and had driven over together. I got my jacket. I found her near the door. And I said, ready? I'll drive. She looked at me and said, you're not driving. You're drunk, I said very evenly. I had 2 drinks. I'm fine, she said louder. I don't care. You're not driving. Here's the thing. Other people were still in the room. Marcus was right there. 2 other friends I'd known for years. Renee was not whispering. She was performing, the way she sometimes performed her concern. Loudly, with an audience, framed as responsibility so it couldn't be argued with. It was a version of control I recognized from years of living with her. The content was different. The mechanism was exactly the same. I kept my voice down. I said, Renee, I've had 2 small drinks. I'm driving home. She grabbed the back of my shirt. It was a hard grab, the kind with intent, the kind I knew the weight of from years of experience. She was trying to stop me from walking out the door, and the way she did it was the same way she had always done things. With her hands, immediately, without thinking. I turned around fast. My fist was already out, not a swing, not a punch. More of a reflexive arc, aimed at her arm or her shoulder, some instinct that had been coiled for about 20 years, and finally, in this one specific moment, released before I could make a decision about it. I did not make a decision. My body made it for me. The contact wasn't what I expected. I felt something give in a way that hands-on arms don't give. The sound she made, a single, high, sharp scream, was unlike anything I had heard from her before, and I had heard her scream many times. She dropped. Straight down, hands going to her face, and when she pulled them away, there was blood. A lot of it, moving fast, running between her fingers and onto the driveway. I stood completely still. She was on her feet within seconds, running for the front door of my parents' house across the yard, leaving a trail I could see clearly under the porch light. The front door opened. Voices, lights coming on inside. I stood in the driveway for what felt like a long time. My parents came outside. My mom went straight to Renee. My dad came to me. He looked at my face for a moment. Then he looked back at the house where my mom had gone with Renee. Then back at me. He said quietly, "What happened?" I told him. Exactly. From the grab to the turn to the contact. I didn't soften it or frame it. I just said what had happened in the order it happened. My dad was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something I had been waiting 18 years to hear from either of my parents. He said, "She had been doing this to you for a long time. I know that. Your mother knows that too." He didn't say it made everything okay. He didn't say it justified anything. He just said it, plainly, out loud in the night air. And it landed in me like something heavy being set down. Inside, my mom was assessing the damage. Renee's nose was broken. Not a hairline fracture. Genuinely broken, displaced. The kind that needed to be looked at in an emergency room. My mom kept saying, almost to herself, that it couldn't be that bad, that I had done it, because I had never done anything like this before, because it would have to have been something serious for me to react that way after all this time. She was right. She just didn't realize she was saying it out loud, as an explanation, rather than an excuse. Renee went to the ER that night. I didn't go with her. I sat in my parents' kitchen with my dad, drinking water, not saying much. At some point I started crying. Not dramatically, just quietly, the way I had cried since I was a kid, the tears that came without permission. My dad put his hand on the back of my neck, the way fathers do when words aren't the right instrument. Renee came home with a bandaged nose and instructions, and the specific fragile fury of someone who has been injured and believes the world owes them a correction. She looked at me and said, "You're going to pay for this," I said. "I'm sorry you're hurt." And that's when I understood, watching her face, that she had expected something different from me. She had expected the old Caleb, the one who cried and apologized and absorbed guilt like a sponge. She had expected to be able to use this, to pick it up and carry it back into the dynamic we'd always had, but this time with the injury as a weapon. She hadn't accounted for the fact that I had already cried, already felt it, already set it down. And that what I felt on the other side of it was not guilt. It was something quieter and more solid, something that felt for the first time in a long time like ground. The ER bill arrived a few weeks later. It was a few $100s, the emergency room charge, the imaging, the treatment. Not nothing, not catastrophic. Renee called me about it. She told me I owed it to her to pay it. She said it in the tone she had always used when she expected compliance. Not a request. Not even really an argument. An instruction. I told her I wasn't going to pay it. She escalated. The way she always escalated. Volume, repetition. The specific rhetoric of someone who has been told they're a victim and has decided to use it as permanent infrastructure. She told me she was going to tell people what I had done. She told me her credit was going to be wrecked. She told me collections agencies were going to call her forever. She said my name like it was a threat. I listened to all of it. And then I said, "Renee, you beat me up the night before my junior prom." I walked in there with bruises on my face. That's one example of one time. This is what I consider payment for the years. I'm not going to argue about it. Silence on the line. A different kind of silence than the ones I was used to. I kept coming back to something my dad had said to me in the kitchen that night. He'd said, "You held that for a long time." Not as an accusation. Just as a fact. A recognition. I held it for a long time, and then, one night in a driveway, I stopped holding it. That doesn't make the broken nose not my fault. It happened. I'm not running from that. What I'm running from is the expectation that guilt is something she gets to deposit in me and withdraw from whenever it's convenient for her. The collections calls, as far as I know, still come. She mentions it when we talk, which is not often. She presents it as an open wound I caused and refused to treat. Here's the thing. The wound I'm thinking about went prom night. It went 100 nights before that. It went the hallway carpet against my cheek, and the split in my lip, and Amber's mom looking at me quietly on the porch, and everything I didn't say to anyone for years. I'm 26 now. My relationship with my family is complicated in the specific way that family relationships get when real things finally get named. My parents and I are close. Closer, honestly, than before, because something true got said out loud and survived. Renee and I talk occasionally, obligatory family events, careful distances maintained on both sides. I don't wish her harm. I don't carry rage. What I carry is the clarity of knowing, finally, that I am not responsible for managing the consequences of her choices. Not then, not now. Not for a bill that is the direct result of her grabbing me one more time, on one night when I had finally, physically, run out of patience. You have to understand. I didn't win anything. There's no trophy for this story. There's just a kid who was gentle for a long time, who got hurt in ways that were real and went unacknowledged, and who eventually stopped apologizing for the moment the ledger corrected itself. I'm not paying that bill. Consider it paid already. That's my story. Thank you for listening.